Welcome to ACC Nation. I'm Jim Quist with our special guest, Karter Baughan, host of the pod KarterKast, where they talk sports. Well, what else, of course. Welcome, Karter.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Happy to be on.
Solid stuff you've got there on your podcast. Tell us where people can check it out and where to follow you on social media.
Yeah, at KarterBA on social media, KarterBA, and then on all social media, TikTok at KarterKast, KarterKast.com. You see it, follow, anything you can do to help out. We really appreciate it.
Sounds good. Hopefully this will bring a couple of people in the door. So I think it's a good listen. So hope people will respond to that. So last week, ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips told ESPN that he plans on meeting with the conference men's basketball coaches and the ADs, obviously, when the season ends, to discuss ways to be a little more proactive, aggressive in changing the narrative surrounding the conference, at least when it comes to basketball, obviously. In large part, this was prompted by the limited bids to the NCAA tournament and a belief, right or wrong, that both Clemson and North Carolina should have received bids. ESPN bracketologist Joe Lunardi tweeted out over the weekend, and this is where we are going to come into play, quoting, "All due respect to the commissioner, but the ACC doesn't have a narrative problem. It has a basketball problem." And as I said, this is where you and I come into play. A lot of folks feel like Lunardi kind of stepped in it and is having a little bit of a hard time getting it off of his shoes. Tell us, what was your initial reaction to that, and what prompted you to write the story that you did?
So the main thing with it is that when you first look at it is, as I'm an ACC fan, I love the ACC. I grew up, I'm from North Carolina. If you're from North Carolina, you got ACC in your blood. That's how it rolls. You see this first and you're like, oh, another guy sliding the ACC. How many more Final Fours do we have to make to get the respect that we deserve? I mean, it's just that simple, it seems like. But I do see where Lunardi is coming from, where he's saying like, oh, the ACC is in a downturn. The ACC is in a downturn. Things do need to improve. That's definitely true. But the fact they only get 5 in, I don't disagree with North Carolina not getting in. Their resume was a little shaky to me. But when you look at a Clemson and you say, we beat this NC State team that's in the field, not even in the first 4, in the field, you beat them by 20 plus every single game 3 times, and you're not in, it just doesn't make sense. And everyone will say, well, you can't have those bad losses. It's so frustrating. There's never going to be a perfect metric system. And then you have people like Lunardi, who I really do like Lunardi. We had him on the show. He's a great guy. Got nothing against him or anything. But sometimes we look too much at metrics and don't look at the eye test.
All right, well, let's talk about downturns of things here. Joe's numbers and Ken Palm's numbers have been going like this as well. So it's not as if it's just one thing here to look at and say, hey, well, the ACC is slipping. It's across the board. It's not as if, and also you can take a look at these other conferences that received a lot more bids than the ACC. Where are they? So
Exactly. We see SEC, Big Ten get 16 combined bids in this tournament. Where are they?
That's a good question. Has anything about this entire tournament surprised you when it comes down to the teams that are in it now?
The teams that are left in it now, talking about the Final Four, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
It does and it doesn't. It does because you're thinking, okay, when you close your eyes and you think about the Final Four, but when you're filling out your bracket, you don't think of Florida Atlantic. You don't think of San Diego State. You think Duke. You think Kansas. You think one of the Blue Bloods. You think the top schools. UConn, I'm not necessarily surprised therein. But I think there's this shift in college basketball where there is a real formula on how to have success in March, and that is having 4 shooters and 1 big man that does all the dirty work. We see that with FAU. We see that with Miami. We saw it last year with North Carolina with Armando Bacot getting on the boards, getting dirty. You can say Leaky Black last year wasn't a great shooter, but Puff Johnson came in and was a great shooter when he came in and played as well. So I think that's the formula, and we're seeing that. And it's kind of becoming more like the NBA, where they're college basketball slowly starting to catch up with the NBA. Well, if we have 5 guys on the court that can shoot the ball, then we have such an advantage.
Do you think this is the way that the NCAA tournament's going to look here on out?
I do for a little bit. It'll be interesting once people's COVID years are ended. So once we stop having 6th and 7th and 15-year seniors, once they're all gone, I think that'll bring it back more to the blue bloods a little bit. But I think it will be like this for now on with transfers, because if you're a guy, let's say, for example, for Duke fans, if you're Jalen Blakes right now on Duke, you're sitting on the bench, you're 8th, 9th man for Duke, but you can go be a starter at, one of these Conference USA schools. It's hard to pass that up.
Indeed, it is. Hey, the impact of the transfer portal. We'll get into the COVID aspect here in just a second. Transfer portal and NIL. Big changes in basketball because of that.
Let me understand this question better. Just saying, are there going to be like bigger changes going forward?
Well, as it is now and moving forward, do you see that there's a progression going on here, that it's really changing the landscape? I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that it's changed the landscape so far, but what do you see something even more momentous coming?
I don't know. The main thing, not necessarily with NIL, I'm so concerned about. I think we're seeing the change. I think it'll kind of be the same thing throughout. The change that's like worries me as a fan is conference realignment. I think that's the change fans should worry about, like how severe that is and what's all of college sports going to look like. I think that's what's concerning. NIL, it is what it is right now. It's the Wild West. It's free agency. It'll be interesting if they eventually, I think the biggest change coming with NIL is if they get a governing body or a commissioner of some sort coming in to regulate it all. But other than that, I don't see much too different than what we've seen the past couple of years.
You don't sound like you're too confident that that any oversight's coming anytime soon.
Yeah, no, no.
Especially considering the track record of the NCAA, for the most part, that has been sort of flat and nothing has really gotten done there. From the standpoint of using bracketology, rankings, the way that we've moved in that direction, and I think in with good reason. I think some of this has been a very accurate reflection of teams. But is there one thing in particular? Maybe all of those stats are missing that we can add in, or maybe we just can't add it in because it's subjective.
I think the latter part of what you said. I think it's just subjective. It's an imperfect solution to we're never going to have the perfect solution, because let's say we expand the field to 80 teams for some reason, and the 81st team is going to complain about not getting in. We're always going to have this year in and year out. As an ACC fan, it is frustrating because, you want to see teams like Clemson. And even though I am a Duke fan and I'm not a fan of North Carolina, but I do want to see North Carolina in the tournament. I want to see the ACC do well. But no, there's no perfect solution. I think the eye test should be more important, but it's hard to say, yeah, we need to use the eye test when at the end of the day, you got to win games. And
so earlier you said you were a diehard Tobacco Road guy, and the opportunity, or it almost feels like this wet blanket's being thrown over conferences with realignment. Tell me what your impression is of where you think the ACC may be headed, or what you hope not to see.
What I hope not to see is the ACC get blown up. And that's a possibility. I mean, anything can fly at this point. There's nothing off the table anymore. I don't want to see the ACC get blown up, obviously. What I think happens is the only way the ACC survives is if they're able to renegotiate their TV contract. Otherwise, this conference is toast. When that first domino falls, everybody's getting out of town. So we're going to see, if Clemson or Florida State says we're going to the ACC or we're going to the SEC, let's get out of here. Duke, North Carolina, all these other teams are going to follow suit. ACC's dismantled, and that ACC will no longer be a thing.
It's a doom and gloom, man.
Yeah, it is doom and gloom, but that's why Jim Phillips, he's got a lot in his hands. He's got to figure out this TV thing, because what they're making right now, stuck in a contract for 20 years, is just not going to cut it in college sports now. After seeing what the Big Ten, the SEC, what they're all making, even the Big 12 is making good money.
Right. And one last question for you here: your confidence in Jim Phillips
on a scale 1 to 10.
Yeah.
I'll just be honest here. I'm not afraid to be. I mean, it's a 2 or a 3. I don't have a lot of confidence. But in his defense, I will say, he's in a very tough spot right now. I mean, he's a quarterback with a bad offensive line right now, so he's in a rough spot. But he hasn't shown me why I should believe in him. That is my issue there. When the most frustrating part of it all is when they're sitting there, debating where their headquarters should be. It's like, you don't even need a headquarters. The headquarters is the most irrelevant point of a conference to ever matter in the history of college sports, because we saw what the Pac-12 did. Pac-12 moved to this swanky San Francisco office. It's hundreds of $1 million, right on the water, beautiful place. And it did nothing. They had to get rid of their offices. They had to sell their lease, whatever. Now they have a tiny office. Everybody works remote. You don't need a big office. The biggest conference in college sports, the SEC, is out of Birmingham, Alabama. They have had plenty of chances to move to Atlanta, being a bigger spot. It doesn't make a difference. But meanwhile, the ACC is concerned whether they're going to go to Orlando, stay in Greensboro, or Charlotte. And the whole time they knew they were going to Charlotte by leveraging the offers of Greensboro and Orlando to get a better bid from Charlotte. That's the part where I'm like, why should I believe that he's the right man to lead this conference? But I would love to be proven wrong.
Good point, man. Good point. Hey, Karter, I appreciate you dropping in for a couple of minutes. I know you're busy and you're headed, as you said to me off air, you're headed out to watch some basketball. So
Yep.
that's a good thing. That's always a good thing.
Hey, I know we've only got a couple games left of basketball this year. I'm sad to see it go. Ready for this offseason, getting the transfer portal and everything. I love your show. Thank you so much for having me on. If you ever need me on again, hit my phone. You got my phone number. Text me, email me, whatever you need. I'm here for you.
I know where you are, my man. So, and you will be back on. I appreciate it. Hey, thanks a lot to Karter Baughan. KarterKast, a great podcast. You want to check that out. Again, Karter, go ahead and tell people where they can find you.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We have clips all over TikTok. You name it, we're on there. KarterKast. Search it on anything. You'll find us. It's super easy. KarterKast. Find it anywhere.
It's good stuff. I promise you it's good stuff. Karter, thanks a lot for joining us.
Anytime.